So we had the use of the carding mill in order to basically convert wool into threads and fabric so that we could use it to make clothes and different types of textiles. We also had the sawmills. Now, sawmills, of course, would typically be placed alongside of a waterway somewhere. In this case, you're seeing a photo of the water-powered saw and grist mill that's along the Sangamon River there up by Lincoln's New Salem State Park. And of course, the use of the sawmill became very, very instrumental in the construction industry. Now, prior to, if you think about this time period, most of the prairie, you would basically build log cabins. You would come through, you would hew trees down and build them. It was a very quick way for us to get shelter in order to provide relief from the sun in the summertime and keep us warm during the wintertime by cutting down trees, building log cabins by notching wood out, and of course filling in the areas around the trees with mud and straw and horsehair and other natural materials that we could use in order to build those houses. Problem with log cabins is it is not a really good use of building materials. So it's there's, and in Central Illinois, our the amount of trees that we have was kind of limited there as well. Most of what we have here and is prairie, so we didn't have a lot of natural forests where we could pull trees. So we, of course, along the rivers there were trees that we could fell and kind of use that, but there's certainly definitely better ways. And of course, as society continued to develop, the advent of the sawmill gave way to where we could now take those trees, the timbers, and more or less process those into board and start to be able to build our houses with planks and boards like more modern construction capabilities are than the old log cabin homes. So, of course, the other technological developments that came about was the cotton gin and, of course, the weaving loom or the power loom. So, and of course, the cotton gin was so important in the area of clothing because it helped to pull the seeds from cotton, whereas prior to that, everything had to kind of be pulled by hand. So the cotton gin actually was there to start separating those seeds so that we could then put in natural wool to make the threads that we needed to do that. And of course, your weaving looms and the advent of the power loom, instead where before somebody was having to hand weave all of those threads and fabric. Now with the technological development of the weaving loom, it made us able to make those fabrics and textiles faster and quicker. So if we talk about transportation and how the Industrial Revolution impacted that, prior to, we were either walking or on horseback. So we might be drawing a carriage on horseback, but of course the technological development of the steam engine, of course, directly led to the first locomotive steam engine or train. And of course, at that point, once we started to have trains, we wanted to go across the continent. We also needed to have bridges that would allow that heavy weight of a train and all of the cars that were behind it. We needed bigger bridges, heavier duty bridges in order to allow that train to cross over rivers. And of course, that led to the development of our steel mills in order to produce the steel and iron that we needed to build heavier capacity bridges, which before were basically, again, constructed out of woods and wood beams. Great examples of some of those old wooden bridges that are still around are, of course, over along the Illinois-Indiana border. Throughout the central areas every year, there's what they call the annual Bridge Festival, where you can go around and see a lot of those old covered bridges that are still kind of around and still being used that are made out of wood. So Industrial Revolution brought about social change. So before the Industrial Revolution, so again, economies were driven by small-scale farming, or by artisan craftspeople. So those products that were used and needed were handcrafted. They were made in the home, a lot of times by the people themselves. Or they were made by gilded tradespeople that were highly skilled, and of course you would take and trade some of your goods for other people's goods as well. Some of the ideas and different types of tradespeople of the time were your hatters, your carpenters, your bakers, blacksmiths, weavers, masons, farmers. When we talk about smithing as a whole, there's coppersmiths, there's coopers, there are different types of tinsmiths. So all of those were tradespeople that you would serve an apprenticeship, get trained, and then either work for the journeyman, the master journeyman, or the master craftsman, or you would kind of strike out on your own and try to do it on your own. So when we talk about the nature of work, so we're going to kind of go through, there's this resource. We'll kind of go here for just a second. So if you take a look, let's kind of open this up. So this is giving you some information here, some more as far as some of these different types of areas that were impacted. So I would like for you to at some point kind of check out this website and kind of see how things were done and changed by the Industrial Revolution as we go through. So that gives you a website there to follow to kind of pick up and learn a little bit more. So agricultural mechanization, of course, made farming a lot easier. And once farming was done, we needed and decreased the amount of hands that were actually needed for that production and farm production. If you were in the early to 1800s, you basically would have a very large family, especially if you're farming. The idea, of course, more hands there were more hands that you have, more kids that you have, the more help you could have on the farm to kind of raise your product and meet your needs. So now, as mechanization increased, we decreased the need for those farm hands. Life got a little simpler in a lot of ways, but that also caused more and more people to be out of work or not have things to do to support themselves. So they moved into the city, and we had urbanization beginning to take place as people moved out of the country and into the cities looking for work. So many industries, of course, had home-based production and arts and craft traditions, and that gave way, of course, to wage labor in larger machine-powered operations. So as industrialization in some ways made things simpler for labor and the labor that was needing to be done, but it also increased demands on the worker. So mechanization meant for work being done, it could be done faster and was much, much more task specific. So the nature of the work performed by highly trained and skilled artisans that needed to know everything about their craft was changing. It was beginning to be broken down into a step-by-step process. It was very task-specific, where you no longer needed to know how to do everything from beginning to end. It could be just one certain task that you did all day long over and over again. And in some ways, we still have remnants of this in our modern manufacturing society as well. Changes also began to occur to the family structure. So often men, women, and their children would work together for the benefit of the farm or the benefit of the trade. So when we started to get urbanization and people moving into the cities, that started moving men towards working outside of the traditional home structure, kind of leaving women home to basically take care of the house and the children there while the men went off to work. So as manufacturing owners, so if you had the resources or the ability to kind of start your own business, then you could also take advantage of mechanization, urbanization, your ingenuity, and of course worker production to help improve and continue to improve your wealth status and power. So those workers, of course, could take advantage of manufacturing to obtain work. So they could also improve their living conditions and in many ways make their life a little easier as well. So oftentimes when we had this, you think about women and children were not necessarily left on the farm. So many women and children also came in seeking work out in the factories. So children especially were needed because of their smaller fingers, where they could be utilized on really fine, minute detail and tasks. So you also had women and children as well as men at this time working in these factories. Of course, that oftentimes did not mean and did not really have great impact. It had a great impact on families, but it didn't mean that your family life was all that great. So it did develop a large working class with these working conditions. And of course, the demands of industry created long hours, up to 16-hour work days. And many times owners would expect 7 days a week. So often they were paying low wages. So certainly safety and unsafe and unsanitary working conditions existed. So that led, of course, to the beginning of different labor struggles and strikes, and of course the development of labor unions as well. So let's go back and talk more in a lot of areas. I think the steam engine was probably one of the most important inventions that came out of the Industrial Revolution that made change possible in manufacturing. So with the advent of the steam engine, you are no longer really tied to rivers there that in order to drive those windmills to give you your power source. And of course, it didn't require expensive animals to feed. So in order to provide a power source, you had more or less portable power. So if you were able to have a steam engine, you could put it on wheels and you could kind of take that steam engine to different areas to provide a power connection for you to drive mechanization. So the creation of the railroad also here allowed for goods, through the use of the steam engine, allowed goods to also be moved quickly and across long distances. So you were no longer, if you lived in New York City, so you could work in New York City or you could own a business in New York City, but you could ship and use the railroad to transport those goods from New York to Philadelphia, across to Chicago, and even more with the Transcontinental Railroad as well. And of course, the advent of the telegraph also increased our ability to communicate with those other cities that were in longer areas and stuff on a quicker basis. So as we take a look and continue to talk about the evolution of manufacturing here, those steam engines could be attached to large belts in these factories. So, and it's really, if you ever get a chance to go to some of the larger cities or see some of these old factories, especially out on the East Coast, it is really, really interesting to see how a steam engine would be connected, and you have these large belts that would kind of go up into the ceiling and be attached to the main drivers for that, and then those belts would come down to be attached to the different machinery in the shop floor. So it was what's referred to as the continuous process manufacturing. So things didn't stop. You didn't stop building that. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit more here in the next video about the concept of interchangeable parts, mass production, and assembly lines here in lecture number 3 to conclude how manufacturing was impacted by the Industrial Revolution.